Now, in this session, we're going to be introducing you to the system we have in place and provides hands-on experience with a toy model meant to give you the flavor of what the SCiMMA identity and access management system can do. And we're still developing it and taking it forward, and it's always been envisaged as a key part of the Institute conceptualization that we're doing. Now, the first person to talk will be Warren Anderson and then Jim Basney. Warren is our SCiMMA identity and access management expert, who some of you may also know from his work in LIGO. He'll be giving an introduction, and Jim Basney of CILogon will be showing you some of the things that we can actually do right now, or in a toy model, and give you an idea of what can be done going forward. So if I could hand over to you, Warren, and screen sharing is enabled. I already had a look at that.
Yeah, I can see that. Thanks, Adam. So as Adam said, my name is Warren Anderson. I manage the identity and access management team for LIGO. And it's really exciting to be part of the SCiMMA conceptualization work as well. So I'm just going to share my screen here to start off with. Share the entire desktop, I think will be best in this situation. I'm going to open up my chat box, Zoom chat box, so that I can see comments in the chat. And if you have questions, feel free to interrupt. If we start going too deep down, we'll postpone for afterwards. But the goal of this is to have an interactive discussion, not have a one-way flow of information. So let me start by the presentation here. Okay, that's on my screen. Can other people see it as well?
Yep, it looks great. And I'll keep an eye out for hands, Warren.
Sounds good. Yeah, I won't be able to look at the hand raises. So as Adam mentioned, we're talking about identity and access management today. And we've broken this into four parts. The first one is an overview of what we're doing for the identity and access management, or IAM, as the common acronym in the community goes. So what we're doing for SCiMMA IAM, and in particular, trying to think about what can be done if you have an IAM system that's available to the entire multi-messenger astronomy community. Then in the second part, we're going to test drive the collaboration management tool that we're using, which is called CoManage. So we've created a very simple community in CoManage, and we'll be inviting people to join in real time. And then we will have a little look around the CoManage platform, and also take a little look at the LDAP that is attached to CoManage, and see what gets added to the LDAP when people enroll or change what they're doing within the collaboration. The third thing is I'm going to turn over to Jim Basney, who is going to show you how, with another demo, how one can leverage the information that's in our IAM system and in our LDAP to design an application, in this case, an application that uses a particular type of authentication and authorization model that we support, OIDC and OAuth 2, to get that information from our system in the application, and with the potential to make authorization decisions. So first to authenticate through the system who people are, and then to make authorization decisions about what they can do or what they should see or how they can interact with your application. And the fourth part will just be an Ask Us Anything session where if people want to have a more involved discussion, we'll leave some time at the end for that. So the problem that we're trying to address is that multi-messenger or astrophysics implies that we're dealing with a very large community. We're expecting distributed teams. These teams are going to represent many different observatories or instruments. Each of the observatories or instrument teams might be multi-institutional, and so we've got a very spread out group of people that we want to be able to bring together to collaborate. And along with those very distributed teams of people, we're going to have very distributed resources. So the data sets, data distribution and data analysis tools, the computational platforms are all going to be spread out. As well, we expect that people will be wanting to have access to collaboration tools. They want to be able to create documents together. They want to be able to share code repositories. They might be interested in having communication channels like Slack. And so we want to be able to identify who is participating and in what way, and give them the correct accesses in the collaboration tools to make sure that they can do their jobs, that we're not sharing information with people who we're not intending to share information with. So the question is, how do you keep track of everyone who is collaborating and who's not collaborating in a given collaboration? And how do you provide access for each team member to every resource? And make sure that we're not sharing resources more broadly than we intend to. So what we've done is start to set up some infrastructure that will allow members of the multi-messenger astrophysics community to hopefully easily define new collaborations, to manage their memberships or other people's memberships for whom they're responsible in existing collaborations. So add people when a graduate student decides that they'd rather work in industry. We have to be able to make sure that we move them off as well. We need to organize collaborators into groups and give them roles and associate those groups and roles with different functions and different abilities within the collaboration. And we need to assert their collaboration membership along with the roles and groups and abilities to downstream resources to allow decisions to be made, authorization decisions. So when we start considering what we wanted to implement this solution, we came upon some requirements that the system be flexible enough to fit a wide variety of collaboration styles. So whether we're talking about a long-lived collaboration or an ad hoc collaboration, whether it's going to be just a few people working together or thousands of people working together, whether it's going to be a flat collaboration with relatively little hierarchy, or as we are developing more and more in LIGO, more hierarchical system where delegation of authority flows down the hierarchy. All of those things we want to be able to accommodate. We want to have something that allows delegation so that the managers of the identity and access management system are not a bottleneck, so that we can hand off to you, the the people who are forming the teams the ability to manage who gets in and how they get in, the ability to create new sub-teams, new roles, new groups within your team, etc. And probably most importantly, we want to make sure that once everybody is enrolled in the system and given the proper roles, that information can be integrated both with existing platforms like AWS, G Suite, GitHub, etc., and with new tools that you might be creating or new platforms that you might be creating or applications. And in order to do that, we want to support some widely used open source libraries and protocols that can be integrated into these bespoke tools that we're using. So the first step in this is the identity management step. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, for identity management, we're going to be using a tool called CoManage. CoManage came out of Internet 2 and is gaining a lot of traction at the moment. The purposes of the identity management platform are to enroll members into collaborations, to organize these collaborators into groups and assign roles to them, to delegate the administrative responsibilities, to provision the collaboration information into widely used tools that can be leveraged downstream, like LDAP, and we're doing that right now. And one of the main things that we wanted to be able to do, and that CoManage allows us to do, is to support the concept of federated identities. So the idea here is that instead of you having to get a new login ID and a new password in order to participate in a SCiMMA collaboration, we want to be able to leverage an existing credential that you already have from your university or your lab, or if you would prefer, or if your university or lab doesn't support the sharing of credentials, and there are still a few that don't, with something like ORCID, the ORC-IDs, or even Google as a last resort. And the other thing that it allows you to do is link, and we've not implemented this yet, but it's something that we're planning to do, is to link multiple logins to your account, so that if you're already logged into a browser with your university credential, but you registered with the ORCID credential, that's okay. We'll be able to know that it's still you because we've linked those credentials together. So that's the identity management part of identity and access management. The next part is the access management. And as I said, we want to support protocols that are widely used. And in order to do that, so we're taking your identity, your authenticated identity from your university or your lab, and we need to be able to send that downstream in a form that's easily consumable by downstream services, including, as I say, ones that maybe you're writing right now. And there's two ways that we could do that right now. For authentication, we support both SAML, which is the most widely used, I would say, the de facto authentication protocol for web applications within the academic community, or for the sort of enterprise world. We also support OIDC. And so, as I mentioned, Jim is going to give an example of how you could integrate an application with our OIDC authentication system with that proxy. We did not put together a SAML example for this particular workshop due to time, but that's also a possibility. And then along with the identities, both of these protocols allow us to send what are called attributes. So send the associated collaboration groups, the associated roles within your collaborations, et cetera, downstream. And typically, these are what's used to make authorization decisions. So if we're sending them to AWS, you're using a cloud platform for something, there'll be a group of people who you want to allow, for instance, to be able to define new IAM user roles. There'll be other people who you want to just be able to spin up EC2 instances or S3 instances with their roles. So we want to be able to define within within the co-manage platform who falls into which of these groups, and then be able to transmit that information downstream to AWS, and that's what we do. And then, as I said, we also have an LDAP, which we can provide access for any application to, for those that need some way of pulling information out that doesn't easily support SCiMMA or OIDC. And I'll talk a little bit about that in more detail going forward. So the last slide for this part of the workshop is just to say that we have a hosting contract that allows us to minimize the amount of effort that we're spending on just running machines, on making sure that platform versions are up to date, et cetera. And that's with CILogon 2. Jim Basney is the founder of CILogon 2, and we've worked in partnership with him, or I've worked in partnership with him both through LIGO and now through SCiMMA and other projects as well, and use the CILogon 2 service, which we have found to be a very good value resource for us. And that's hosted at NCSA. So as I say, we get this very professional level of administration for our systems. And it also means that we have access to experts like Jim Basney and Scott Cranda to provide expertise for going forward. So I'm going to stop sharing and maybe take a minute to ask if we have any questions at this point. Actually, haven't stopped sharing, but I've stopped presenting. So if there are no questions, then let's move on to the next stage, part 2 of the workshop.
If I could just interject, Warren.
Sure.
I mean, you made the point about getting professional expert support from Scott and Jim, and I want to re-emphasize how important this is, because the skill that they bring in some sense is invisible because you don't know how hard the thing is because they're doing it so well. But it's been a real benefit to us in getting this spun up, Warren's expertise and Jim and Scott's, because this thing's a lot more complicated than it seems like it ought to be. Behind the scenes, not for a user. Yeah. So in order to have the power to do to meet those requirements, actually requires some fairly significant voodoo on the back end. And as a matter of fact, I just got out of a 2-day workshop on co-manage because there's been a lot of development over the last couple of years since I started using it. And I started feeling like I was getting left behind on some of the features, and I wanted to get caught up. And that workshop was taught by Scott Cranda, who is one of the developers of the Manage product. So when I say expertise, I mean at the level of somebody who can give you the details of how the code works or the database schema
behind it. This also gives us the ability to say, this is something that we keep running into over and over again. That's a problem for our community. And there's no way to change. There's no way to configure co-manage to get around it right now. Is that something that we could put onto the roadmap for the development team? And if it sounds like something that would be widely useful, it will get onto the roadmap. If it sounds like something that's really, oh, that's your problem, and nobody else is having that problem, then it doesn't get put onto the roadmap. But then, we also have the opportunity to contract out the services of somebody like Scott, because he's got a consulting company, to implement that in our particular platform, even if it doesn't get into the mainstream, into the main branch of the co-manage development. Anything else before we go on? It's a quiet group. Okay, I'm going to put into chat a link, that link is going to lead you to this page that I have here, which is our simple example of a onboarding page. So a page where you can enroll into our little demo collaboration that we've made. And our collaboration is called the SCiMMA community. And as you enroll, you're going to select a team, either red team or blue team. Point is just to demonstrate that we can provide, well, a number of things. We can provide different enrollment flows that already pre-populate some role or group information about you. In this case, whether you're on blue team or red team. Everybody will end up in the same collaboration, but already they'll have been divided into blue team or red team. My prediction is almost everybody will be in blue team because it's on the left. And then it also will allow us to show how we can make access control decisions with Jim's demo. So can everybody see the link in the chat and put it into a browser, please? And I'm gonna, if you've done the co-manage thing before and you want to race ahead, feel free. But if not, I'm gonna go step by step through the enrollment process with people here. So I don't have a good way to gauge whether everybody's ready to go. So if you're not ready to go, speak up.
Maybe people could raise their hand in the chat window when they've gone to the link. Okay, let's see hands appearing.
A lot of names I recognize.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start going through. So as I said, I predict most people are going to join blue teams. I'm going to join red teams, so we have at least somebody there. And the first thing you're going to see when you click on your team button is this login page. So as I said, we're going to use federated login. Yeah, Team Green, we'll talk about Team Green a little bit later. You're going to be able to select how you want to log in. So if you click on the Google button, it's not really a Google button. It's you get to choose which institutional login you want to use. So you can scroll through this very, very long list of things. All the universities, research labs, observatories, businesses, well, not so much businesses, governmental agencies, etc., that participate in a federated identity program. But we can also shortcut things by typing into the dialog and down selecting the number of choices we have. So I want to log in with my LIGO identity. So I type in LIGO. I see there's 4 choices here. 2 of them are for LIGO India, which I don't belong to. 1 is for the Institute of Technology at SLIGO, which I also don't belong to. But 1 is the LIGO Scientific Collaboration, which I do belong to. There's a button here to remember your selection. I do not recommend clicking that unless you're really, really sure that this is the identity you want to log in with every time, because it's going to make that assumption forever down the road if you do that. We can get you out of that loop if we really need to, but it's not. It does limit your choices down the road. Leo, I'm not going to do it during the demo right now. Maybe Jim, there's actually, let's see. Is the link on this page? It's not on this page. Yeah, Jim has just put into the chat the forget what I chose because I don't want to be there forever link.
And if an institution is not on that list and wants to get on the list, is there an easy way for them to do that?
It's not easy. So basically, as you can see, there are hundreds of choices there, and each of these choices not only operate a login system, but they're going to operate some number of. We're getting quite a bit of noise. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone. So they also are going to operate a lot of services that people want to log into. And that creates a 100 squared pairwise sharing system that's just not scalable, or thousands squared to exchange the information to allow secure logins. So what you do instead is you join an identity federation. In the US, the identity federation is called InCommon, and you can find more information about it at there. Leo, can you, I see in the chat, can you just open another browser, an incognito window, and start again, but follow along with us? Thanks, Jim, for the link to incommon.org. So in the US, you would go through the process of joining incommon.org. And it's not a particularly lightweight process because they do have requirements on how you operate your system. It's really only for SAML identity providers, which, as I said, almost all the universities and research organizations have. So if your institution is not there, I recommend using ORCID, which is there. So if I go back to the search bar here, or the search window, you can see ORCID is one of the possible ways of getting in. And I think almost everybody should have an ORCID if they're a researcher at this point. I know we've run into journals that require them. So I think that's a good way to go. If you don't have an ORCID and you don't want to get one and your university's not there, as a last resort, you can always go back to where we started, which is Google, and use a Google Gmail login to get in.
I see on In Common, they have a subsection that says EDU Roam connectors. Does that mean that organizations that are in EDU Roam are automatically in the system?
No, EduRoam is a different technology. It used to actually be run by a different organization, but In Common has taken over management of it. So it's a separate entity. The other place you might have seen In Common is they run a certificate authority that you can use to get SSL certificates for your web services or other services. So that's another place where people might be familiar with it from. So it is the Identity Federation. It runs the Identity Federation. It also does some of these other tasks as well. Okay, so there's been a lot of messages in the box here. I see somebody, Marcos says he's used Google Validation for CloManage in the past. So I'm going to use LIGO. I'm going to go ahead. Oops. I wonder what happened there. Internal server error. Okay, I'm going to start over. So I'm going to make an incognito window. Let's see, I can get there from here. Community. I see that my internet is unstable.
Your audio is breaking up a little bit for me, at least.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm actually home sitting a friend's place, so I don't even have control to upgrade the networking. Okay, there we are. Okay, type too fast.
I'm glad to see as the person in charge of the LIGO IAM, you have a nice long passphrase or word.
Yeah, we actually in place a system, or I went and signed up for Blue Team after all of this. We actually put in place a system that encourages people to have passphrases of 5 or more words. Okay, so we begin the enrollment process. This is a very simple enrollment process. We often would have an approval step, which we don't have in this. We often would have more attributes here for you to see and change. As you see, if you prefer to have all of this information that's here, my first name, last name, and email address, that was provided by the LIGO login service. I can, if I want, change that for my SCiMMA community participation. I do see one thing at the bottom here, which is I'm in Blue Team, which I cannot change because I signed up for Blue Team. But if I wanted, for instance, to get my email somewhere else, I could change that. But I'm just going to go ahead with what's there. And well, let's go through this first. I had already set up in the window my mail, but I have now I've closed that window, so I don't have it. So I've finished the first step in enrollment, but now it's saying that it wants to make sure that the email I gave it is a valid email. And the reason we want to do that is in case we need to reach out to you because for some reason, we want to have at least one way that we know that we can get into contact with you. So You can read the message. It says email should come quickly, and that you can close this window. So I'll just close that window and open up mail. And I forward my LIGO mail to a Gmail box. And I will have to look up the password for that because I never actually type it anywhere. And Leo got really excited about seeing the length of my password before, so he should get especially excited when he sees this one. And now, hopefully, quickly, before I share too much information from my LIGO mailbox, I'll try and switch down to the slow sharing. So this is going to load, and so that I don't expose too much. I don't know what's in my LIGO email box. I've spent the last 2 days in a workshop. There we are. Okay, I go back to sharing now.
So I see 3 people still have their hands up. Are
So
they
here's the
for
email.
questions? So Don and Julia still have their hands up. Have you got questions for Warren? I think no. Carry on, Warren.
Okay, so here's the email that was sent. It says, thank you for enrolling. Before your registration is finalized, oh, there goes the internet connection again. Please click on the link below. We'll click on the link. It will take us back to CoManage and finalize our registration. Okay. So one of the joys of SAML and OIDC, some other technologies, is that they're called single sign-on solutions, which is great if you want to always be known as who you are, but does raise some problems when you are changing your status with a service like the CoManage. So it says, I've successfully verified my information, but before you log into SCiMMA, you need to log out to get rid of your old state of petitioning, trying to enroll, but not having been enrolled yet. And it says, when I do that, I'm going to see a button that says log in, but that tab is still going to remember my bad state. So I don't want to log in. I want to ignore that button. So I log out. There's the login button that I'm not going to press. I'm going to close the window instead. And then after logging out, I can go and log in here, and then I can safely close the page. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So here I am. I've logged into the SCiMMA community. I can see some news items that are on the front page. If I look here, I don't see my name, which means that it still remembered a little bit of the state from before. I'm just going to log out quickly. And this is the kind of stuff you only have to do when you first enroll and are trying to clear out all of the semi-coherent state. And then afterwards, things should go fine. So I log back in. Now it knows who I am. I'm Warren Anderson. So I can see up here, I'm Warren Anderson. I've logged in with my LIGO scientific collaboration identity. I can see some what information it knows about me. So it knows my name. It knows that I've got some identifier from LIGO. It's created some identifiers for me that will help downstream applications to keep track of me. So the problem with things like EPPN is that if I decide to change my name, and we see that on a fairly regular basis within LIGO for a variety of reasons, this identifier changes. And I don't want to lose my accesses, what the downstream applications know about me. So we create other identifiers that are not going to change, that can keep track of it. Likewise, it's got my email address, and it knows I'm a member of Blue Team, and these are automatic groups. It knows that I'm in the collaboration, and some more details about me. On the left, I can look at groups, and I can see what groups I have access to or belong to. So there are a bunch of groups. Blue Team, these ones that begin with CO are all automated groups just to do internal tracking within CoManage. Red Team, and now, oh, there's a green team as well. So let's take a look at my group membership. So I'll manage my group memberships with the tab up on the right here. And it says, I'm a member of Blue Team. I'm not an administrator for this particular community, but I am a member, and I'm an active member. I'm not a member of Red Team, and if I try and click on Red Team, I can't add myself because it is a closed group. And indeed, all of the groups are closed, but active, except for the green team, which is open. So green team, I can actually select to add myself to by clicking member and then saving. Oh, and again, let me try that. There we go. So some of the problems you're seeing we have are because of the unstable network connection. So packets are getting dropped, and we're not getting the kind of smooth interactions that we'd normally get, and that's because I'm screen sharing. Let me now take a look at this same collaboration from the point of view of an administrator. So here I'm back in the SCiMMA community, and I'm Warren Anderson. But now I've logged in with my UWM identity. And you can see I have a lot more stuff on the left here. That's because I'm the platform manager for this community. And as a platform manager, I can take a look at things like my population and see, oh, look at all these new people who've joined. That's awesome. So we've got a lot of new members in our community. That's great. There might be some people who are still in the process of going through. I see we've got 3 people who are still in the process of going through. I can resend invitations to them. What's happened is that they started the process, but they have not confirmed their email yet. And if they come back to me and say, hey, I looked in my mailbox, I looked in my spam folder, I couldn't find anything, I have the resend invite button for them. Philip, Bryce, or Chad, if any of you want, I can resend the invitation now. Just put it in the chat. Let's take a look at the groups. So the people in the groups are probably the most interesting things, especially for this demo, because I haven't set up any departments or mailing lists or any of the other things on the left here. So let's take a look at Blue Team. And I can see all the blue team members. I can see that most of them are active. We do have Bryce and Chad who are pending confirmation. Likewise, we can take a look at the red team. Oh, see, people actually went to red team preferentially just because I said it, I think. Don, you do not seem to be on a team. Okay, well, let's take a look at that in a second. And then finally, green team, which anybody can sign themselves up for. Let's see. Oh yeah, a few people did that as well. So these groups allow a nice way of organizing people. They can be hierarchical in the sense that in this tool, they're called nested groups. So you can make everybody who's a member of a group be a member of another group. So say everybody who's in red team is automatically in green team when you set up green team. Groups at this level actually are things that I've switched back to my non-privileged user account here. Only a couple of things on the left. And if I look at manage groups, I can, even as a non-privileged user, I can add a new group if I want. So I'm going to define my own team, people I want to collaborate with. I can make it open so that anybody who wants can join my team. I can set it to be active or suspended. Of course, we want to start off with it active, but if at some point I want to freeze the group and not allow anybody else in, I can make it, I can suspend it, or I can make it not open and add the group. And now I see, Vast has a new group and Warren's got a team. And Vast has closed their group, so I have to be somehow invited or added by the Vast administrator. So whoever made the Vast team, you can go into your group and add any members that you want, but I can't see who they are. Okay, Don, you say you're not in any group. Let's see if we can find you here. So we've got enough people that's probably easier to use the alphabetizing at the top. Don, you are a blue team member. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to do is switch to this other collaboration that I've made. So this one with the green bar here, and I'll just go back to the dashboard. So if you click on the name of the community, you go back to the default display. This one with the green bar is the community that we've set up specifically for this workshop. We also have over here, and my screen sharing keeps dropping down every time I try and reach for this tab. Wrong. There we are. We also have the collaboration that I've set up for the people who are currently doing work on the wonderful things that you heard about yesterday, that we're talking about today, and that we'll be seeing more of tomorrow. And this one is a little bit more advanced. We actually have divided people up. We actually have divided people up into a bunch. Well, it's actually probably quicker to do it with groups. Let me show you groups up by the institution that they come from. So we have Las Cumbres Observatory, Michigan State. So there are 10 organizations that are participating in this grant. Each one of them has a custom enrollment flow to make it easy to have more people join in. each one of them has an admins group. So Columbia University admins group is Juja. And so when new people join from Columbia University, Juja, and go through the Columbia University enrollment flow, Juja will get an email saying, hey, somebody wants to join your group. Go and take a look at their application and see if that's somebody who you want to be part of the SCiMMA project through Columbia University. And if it is, you can approve them. If not, you can deny them. Generally speaking, you know, people don't try and apply for no reason, so almost everybody gets approved. The other thing I wanted to point out on this dashboard is we've got a couple of service buttons up here. One is to access the Amazon Web Services console. So we have a AWS instance that is being used for development of the PubSub system. And there's an enrollment flow for joining the DevOps team right here. So I can request DevOps membership. I've already done that, as it turns out. And if the DevOps administrators recognize you as a legitimate member of the DevOps team and grant your enrollment, you're added to a group with a weird name, which is required by Amazon Web Services. And people in that group can push this button and log in to the AWS console with their SCiMMA identity. So I'll just quickly go through that to show you how easy it is once these things are set up to give people access to these kinds of services. So this is UWM, not LIGO. Oh. And they don't have as draconian password rules, but they do have duo second factor. So I have to go to my phone and say, yes, that was me. And anybody who's used AWS recognizes that. So here's our AWS console. Okay, backing out, it's saying, hey, you're already logged in. Why are you trying to log in again? The other thing that you can do here is request an SSH account. And if you go through that, it will allow you to explain why you want one. And I've already done it, so the field doesn't show here. But if I did not already have an SSH key in the system, it would allow me to upload an SSH key as well. And again, the administrators of the AWS instances can use that information to provision accounts. The last thing I want to show you is the LDAP. So I've got an LDAP browser here. Apache Directory Studio is my preference. And I can, I've got pulled up in here the SCiMMA community. So this collaboration that we just made for the workshop that everybody has just enrolled into. In this community, I have access to all of the groups that people can join. And I see that this has not been updated because I already had this open since we created some new groups. So now we have Warren's team as well. We don't have VAST, and I'm not sure why that is, but we could figure that out fairly quickly if we wanted to. Likewise, we have a person record for everybody.
VAST has been deleted, that's why it's not there.
Okay. So here's Jim Basney, and along with his his identity that he brings in, I have his first name, I have his email address, and I see he's a member of Red Team. Jim's actually got 2 accounts on here, so he can demonstrate both Red Team and Blue Team. And if I had an application that was unable to speak SAML or OIDC OAuth 2, which are really targeted mostly at web applications. So for instance, for the SSH shell accounts on AWS, that's not a web authorization and authentication. That's goes through different means. But what we're doing is using standard tools for account provisioning, shell account provisioning on Linux systems to pull information out of the LDAP and create accounts. And so likewise, if you had an application that was not a web application, had trouble doing SAML or OIDC, but you wanted to know everybody who was in Blue Team because they're the people who should be able to see your data or access your service, you can get a list of those people. Again, you won't see their names. You see this identifier that will never change, so that accesses don't get messed up when people change institutions or names or anything else. That these access rules can cut across any changes like that. And if you, this is a little bit opaque, but if I copy this value and search in people for who that is, actually, I forget what that attribute was called. I think it's VO person ID equals. Oh, wait, I had VO person ID in there twice. Go back to people, do a search. Put parentheses around it because that's how LDAP likes its query filters to be written.
And Niall's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Well, this was just, you were talking about having a unique ID for each person. The system has the capability to merge accounts, I hope, because we spend a lot of time with, person A goes to institution B and starts second account.
Yeah, so we can merge accounts by hand. There's facilities built into co-manage.
Okay, yeah, no, it's definitely a manual process. That's one of those things that you don't think about sometimes, but we think about it quite a bit.
Yes, well, we also think about it quite a bit. So yes, there is a way to merge accounts. There's also a way to catch. So we can, as I said, we can link different logins. So if the person has both logins at the same time, they can actually self-service the linking of those 2 identities into the same account.
Ah, so they can even link the 2 accounts together when they find out that it's one and the same. Beautiful.
Yeah. And likewise, we have machinery that is implemented, but we can even get more machinery to do guessing on whether somebody is really the same person, and ask them, hey, don't you already have an account? Maybe you should get your new identity linked to this old account identity.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's one of those things I fear on any authentication mechanism these days.
I saw a hand up from somebody, but it flashed by so quickly I lost track of who it was.
Warren, that was me. I'm sorry. When you started this part about the about LDAP, did you show how to navigate to? I mean, did you show what LDAP host to use, or did
I did not. Okay. And if I did, you wouldn't be able to use it anyways, because these LDAPs Ever since we switched to GDPR, we never set up an LDAP that is anonymously browsable anymore. So I would have to give you a credential in order to be able to read the LDAP.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So if you're setting up an application that wants to read the LDAP, get in contact with me, and I will give you bind DN and password through a secure mechanism that allows you to do reads. And if you needed to write to the LDAP, we probably don't allow that, but because that can, that has the potential to mess with other people's information as well. So, we'd have to really have a fairly ironclad use case for wanting to implement that, but that could also be discussed. I saw another hand.
Yeah, I wanted to ask just to make sure that dashboard that you're showing there, that's only available at the moment for people who are already involved in the whole effort, right? Because
That's right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So this is the prototype collaboration for the SCiMMA Institute that we're working towards, with the blue splash up at the top. But you're only a member of the, I shouldn't say only a member, you're a member of the SCiMMA community, which has a green splash at the top and has different functionality. So that's basically everything I wanted to demo for right now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn this over to Jim, who's going to show you how to do the next step, which is leverage all of this nice identity information that we can collect and organize.
Before you hand it over, Warren, there's 3 hands up from Marcos, Don, and then Leo.
I think we got Marcos just now.
Okay, so Don. You're muted, Don.
The membership of every person in every group is transparent to anybody that is part of the system. There's no hidden groups. There's no ability to hide members of the group.
There's absolutely the ability to hide members of the group. So you'll recall, let me just share again for a second. Oh, actually that group is gone. So I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know if I've got anything to share. When the VAST team was made, I've still got the screen up. So until I update, VAST will still be on my screen, even though it doesn't exist anymore. When the VAST team group was created, I could see that a VAST group exists. So it's not easy to hide the existence of one of these style of groups from other people, but I have no idea who is in it or how I can get that information. There's no way that I can do that as a regular user.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. And then Leo has his hand up. You're muted, Leo.
I know, I was just trying to find the browser tab. So I can provide an identity from the LSC or from my university, but I think that for other government employees, and in particular NASA employees, it'll probably help if we can provide an identity from NASA. And I know that NASA has uses some single sign-on stuff. So my question is, what is the sort of top level documentation for integrating into CILogon that I would need to show someone in NASA IT to, yeah.
Yeah. So
your counterpart to NASA.
yeah, Andy was basically asking the same question: how do I get onto this login list? And the answer is that the NASA labs that are operating the SCiMMA identity providers need to federate with InCommon. And if you recall, I was one of the people who went with InCommon about 6 months ago to NASA Goddard and talked to them about how that would work. Unfortunately, NASA, as a government organization, it has to deal with the NIST standards for information security. And these are very foreboding looking standards. What we tend to find is that DOE sites and NASA labs and other places of that sort will really err heavily on the side of caution when it comes to security, rather than expose themselves to any violation of the NIST standards. Nonetheless, as I said, NASA Goddard is looking at it, and I was down at LBNL a few months before that, talking to the people there about setting up a federated identity system, much like the one that I just demoed for their use. And in fact, the co-managed training I did today, one of the people we talked to while we were down at LBNL was taking that. So I took that as a positive sign that they're really going to try and figure out how to use federated identities in a way that's compliant with the NIST standards. In the meantime,
Jim just pasted a link, sorry, in chat to point
awesome.
NASA context to.
In the meantime, I think we have these backup solutions like ORCID and Google, and maybe you're not, as a government employee, allowed to use Google for anything. Hopefully, you can at least use an ORCID to log in and leverage it that way. But I agree that it's nice to have your own institution be your login and not have to look up your ORCID login information every time you want to get in.
Okay. Do you mind just, I want to make sure that I can, it sounds like, I don't know, it may be superfluous for me to try to push on this, but I'm just curious who you talked to, who you were talking to at Goddard?
I don't remember, but I will see if I can pull up the folder in the InCommon drive that has that information and forward it to you. And I think it is useful. I think it's very useful. We have found it very useful in the past when researchers say, hey, to administration, hey, everybody else is doing this. It's assumed that everybody will be capable of doing this, and your policies are preventing me from participating, from collaborating in the way that I should be able to do here. So I think it's absolutely worth you talking to people if you're interested in trying to push that forward. I will say that NASA's been playing with it, been talking about it more and more seriously over time, but for at least 5 years, I've been part of that conversation.
Okay, I will do that. I guess there's a second part to my question. I think that, so there are also rules that NASA has about integrating, about having any kind of user accounts that are connected to web services that are offered to the public, and I suspect that I think that a way to placate those concerns is to integrate with some single sign-on technology such as this, so that we're not actually the ones that are handling the accounts. And so I guess I want to ask a similar question. What is the sort of top level documentation that I give to that I want to give to people at NASA who work on like cloud computing contracts and things like that?
So it turns out it's the same deal. In common, the Identity Federation includes both the services and the identity providers. So they're responsible for the data exchange that allows secure login between the service and the identity provider. The identity provider learns about the service because the service is part of an identity federation, and the service learns about the identity provider because the identity provider is part of the same federation.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions about this part? Okay, so I'm going to stop and turn over to Jim and close my mic and clear my throat.
Okay, thanks, Warren. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to share my screen. This page has the outline of the content I would like to cover today. And so I'm going to take this URL and put it in the chat, if I can find the chat button. There it is. And I'll rely on all of you to give me guidance on how deep into the details you'd like to go today. I know we do want to reserve at least 30 minutes for some continued open-ended discussions. So just let me know as we go. We'll see how far we get. But I'll be showing an OpenID Connect simple demo application, which is running in a Docker container. And it's going to use the attributes that you just had associated with your accounts through the SCiMMA community enrollment. And then I'll give some pointers to CILogon's OpenID Connect documentation for how to connect your application, and point to some other implementations of libraries and other implementations you could use, so you don't have to implement OpenID Connect yourself. And lastly, point to some other existing CILogon integrations that might be a good example. And so the first step is to go to the demo app. And so let me put that link in there. You can all follow along and log into the demo app. So you'll see the similar login screen that we've been seeing already with logging into CoManage. And so I'm going to log in with my University of Illinois ID. And because I already logged in at University of Illinois today, it's not prompting me again for my username and password. It's doing single sign-on. And it's telling me some nice information, that I'm a member of the SCiMMA community and that I'm a member of the Blue team. This is my SCiMMA user ID. And it's also showing me the details of the HTTP headers that are being passed to this application. And so now I'm going to log out and try again with a different identity. This time I'm going to come in with NCSA, which seems to have lost my session, so I'll log in here. And so in this case, my NCSA identity is not yet enrolled in the SCiMMA community, so it says I'm not a current member, but I could enroll if I'd like. One more example. I will log in with my Exceed identity. And my Exceed identity is a member of the red team. And as we were discussing, really what I should be doing is using CoManage to link my University of Illinois identity with my Exceed identity and my NCSA identity, so I get consistent results here. But for a demo purposes, it shows the different attributes for my different identities. And so what this application is doing is giving different welcome messages based on the attributes that it gets based on my identity and my attributes out of LDAP. And so we're using an Apache module called mod auth OpenIDC that I'll give a pointer to, and it's setting Apache HTTP headers based on all the information that's coming in about my identity. And so here's my common name, my email address, the EduPerson principal name that Warren showed us, and information about the identity provider I used. And this is member of is really critical. Here's the list of group memberships that the application received out of CoManage. And so how did that work? To set up this application, I logged into CoManage and I registered an OpenID Connect client with the SCiMMA community. And this is an example of CoManage functionality that's not yet part of the main branch of CoManage, something that Scott Caranda developed as part of the CILogon project. We do hope to contribute it back to CoManage, but it's an example where there's some flexibility. We can have modifications to CoManage as part of CILogon that don't have to immediately go back to the CoManage main branch. And so note this client ID here, and then I'll show you some other attributes here in the definition of this application. So the application has the name, SCiMMA Community Demo App, and home URL. And so this is what you see when you log in here, the name and the URL for more information. So you know what application is requesting information about you before you decide to proceed and log in. And then we've also got the redirect URLs. After you log in, where do you want to be redirected back to the application? And so here's the URL for the application that's running at demo.cilogon-sandbox.org. But also have a redirect URL of localhost.local domain, which makes it possible for me to log in. Makes it possible for me to log into a local container.
Доброе утро. Доброе утро.
Jim, I don't seem to be able to hear you now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I just unmuted you, I think.
Okay, thanks. So the scopes is controlling what information we're requesting as part of the login. So that includes profile that has the user's name, email address, and then CILogon user info with some additional information. And then here's where
Jim?
we're, yep.
Sorry, I think Leo's got a question.
No, I don't. Did I have my hand up?
I see your hand up.
Or went down. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, please do jump in anytime if you've got a question. And so here's where we are using the LDAP that's populated by CoManage to add additional information to the user's login based on their membership in the collaboration. And so we're asking for the VO person ID, the user's memberships, their email address. And as Warren explained, at enrollment time, you might accept the email address that's provided by your home identity provider, or you might choose a different email address to use with the collaboration. And so here's where we get the collaboration email address. And similarly, I'm asking for the common name that you've selected as part of the collaboration, which may be a different name than you get from your home campus. And so with that registration and that callback URL, I have stood up a container running in the Amazon Fargate service with a few parameters defined, the client ID that was part of the registration, client secret that I only got at registration time, but it's not shown in that interface anymore, so I had to be sure to remember that. This is a password for encrypting cookies as part of your single sign-on session with OpenID Connect. And so that's just a random password I chose. My email address for contacting the administrator of the service. Here's that redirect URI, the scopes I want to request, and again, the server name. And so those are the parameters that this container takes as input. And so that's how I get this container running in AWS. But now why don't I show how easy it is for you to take this container and run it yourself. So the container lives here on GitHub. And that's another one of those links that are here on that CILogon SCiMMA page. And so I'm going to check out this repository and build a container. So I'll clone the repo. And I'll build the container. And then the next thing I'm going to do is start up the container, but I'm going to start it up with some environment variables that are in this SCiMMA demo env.txt. So let's look at that first. So this is very similar to the environment that I was setting in the container running in AWS. It has the client ID, the client secret, the scope, the password, my email address, but in this case, I'm saying use the redirect URI of localhost.localdomain and server name of localhost.localdomain, since I'm just running it on my laptop here. So let's start that up. Oh, all right, I didn't clean up after myself when I was testing. Let's try that again. Okay, so now if I come back here to localhost.localdomain OIDC, I'll log in again. And it's the same application, but now running in a container on my local machine, getting the same attributes from the CILogon OpenID Connect provider that's querying the LDAP to get the group memberships. And so Warren did mention that this is using the OpenID Connect standard that's built on the OAuth standard. And so the Apache module helpfully provides the OIDC access token for us here. And so let's try to use it. So to see how simple OAuth is to work with, just put this new access token into my curl request. That is a request to the CILogon OAuth2 user info endpoint. And here's the JSON response that gives me my name, my my memberships, including my membership in the red team. And so now let's look inside the container to see more details about this application. So now I'm inside the container, and so I mentioned that the container is running Apache HTTPD with the Apache module called mod auth OpenIDC. So let's look at the Apache config, and it's going to be mods enabled open, no, it's, which is it? Conf enabled OpenIDC. And so this is the mod auth OpenIDC configuration. Again, it's got the client ID and client secret. the scope and crypto passphrase and redirect URI that I set in the environment. So the other items in here that are provided by the container are the OpenID Connect metadata for the CILogon service. That includes the service endpoints, what cryptographic algorithms we use for signing tokens, et cetera. And then a standard Apache HTTPD location configuration to say protect the OIDC directory and using OpenID Connect and require valid user authentication. And so then in our HTML, in that directory, I have a very simple PHP script that is looking for the common name, if it's available, and saying hello to the person, checking the contents of the isMemberOf header and putting that into an array of groups, checking for membership in the collaboration members active group, and if so, setting isMember to true, checking for membership in the blue team, setting is blue team member true, checking for membership in the red team. So somebody wants to submit a pull request to check for the green team that I just learned about today, that would be very welcome. And then below, just checking if you're a member of the collaboration, then I print out a message that you're a current member. If you're a member of the blue team, I print out that you're a member of the blue team, red team, and also I print the VO person ID, and then print all of the headers for diagnostics. And that's the application, just a simple PHP script that's relying on mod auth OpenIDC to do all of the single sign-on with CILogon. And so I see in the chat, Ron has asked, can you show where I got the OIDC client ID again? Yes. I got that when I registered my app here as an OIDC client. I might, let me be bold and register a second app.
Now, as Jim's doing that, sorry, Jim, I'm just going to interrupt a little bit here. You can see on his left bar, he's got a lot of options, including something called platform. That means he's actually acting as a super user right now. So registering an OIDC client is not something that we allow just every user to do right now. We want to have some control over who is taking our identities and using them for things. We want people who log in through the SCiMMA system to have some confidence that they're going to end up someplace they want to be, and not not someplace that they don't want to be. So for security reasons, right now, if you wanted to register an OIDC client, you would have to talk to us.
But this shows that if you do have the permission to register an OIDC client, when you make that first registration, you get back the client ID and client secret. Any other questions about this app? If not, I think I'll press on. So I showed here the repo where you can find that index.php and the Docker file that defines the container. And if you just prefer to get the container image, I did put it up to Docker Hub. And oh, it's tough to get those. Let me bring this down here while okay, got it. We've seen this page. Okay, so here's the CILogon documentation for integrating OpenID Connect applications. That includes the definitions of the different scopes. So talks about how the profile scope will provide given name, family name, and the complete name. user info is where you get that EPPN, the name of the IDP. And also there's some examples of using curl or configuring modauth OpenIDC and other examples that I'll be presenting. And here's another endpoint with CILogon to get a list of identity providers. But this is the OpenID Connect metadata URL that I referred to before that tells software like modauth OpenIDC where to redirect the user to perform authorization and what types of signing algorithms are supported. And so OpenIDC being a standard, we can go to the OpenID Foundation and find out about certified relying parties, libraries and servers that you can use to integrate this capability into your application. And right at the top of the list is the one I'm using in this demo, modauth OpenIDC. And so that link just brings us over here to the GitHub home of modauth OpenIDC that has a lot of nice documentation about the OpenIDC standards that it implements. But we can see some examples of connecting other types of applications to the CILogon OIDC interface. So if you have a Drupal application, for example, we have a specific CILogon auth module, but you could use the standard OIDC interface. And after registering, you just put in the client ID, client secret, and the CILogon endpoints, standard OpenID Connect endpoints. If you want to bring up a Globus endpoint with CILogon authentication, because Globus supports OpenID Connect with CILogon, you can just specify what identity provider you want to use, and Globus will take it out of that IDP list that I showed on the other tab. Here I'm showing the Jupyter Hub OAuthenticator for CILogon. And so again, that has the very similar configuration parameters, client ID, client secret, and it's using the CILogon.org authorize and token endpoints, the standard endpoints. Here's another fairly new example, how to configure your Galaxy instance as a CILogon OIDC client. And again, the parameters are the standard parameters, client ID, client secret, the redirect URL, and I think realm is an internal to Galaxy. And the last example is, this one is Open on Demand. And so again, Open on Demand in this case is using modauth OpenIDC, and so it's the similar parameters with using the discovery URL and the redirect URI that I showed in my example application. And that gets me to the end of the content that I wanted to cover. So let's open it up for questions or comments. Anything else you'd like to see in the configuration of the application?
Jim, I was just going to interject comments from the chat there. That if someone did want to create their own application, then they should submit that request to the SCiMMA security policy group, so to Warren, for example, or to me, and I can refer it on to them.
Yep, that sounds good to me.
I'll just add that, well, I'll ask you a question actually, which is if somebody had, didn't want to use modauth OIDC with Apache, but had a Flask application or a Java applet or something, would it be substantially harder to try and integrate that into integrate OIDC into their app?
No, nope, because modauth OpenIDC is setting your standard Apache HTTP headers with the authenticated user information. My example app showed a PHP app, but that can be a Flask app, or that can be You can have AJP connected to your Java container running your Java app and pass along the HTTP headers that way. And so it's a pretty standard thing for web apps to be looking for those HTTP headers, looking for remote user and other headers for doing authentication. And so that's why mod.openidc follows that convention.
So does anybody have any other questions? We've got about 20 minutes, a little over 20 minutes left.
Leo's hand is up.
So I want to know about how you see this, how you see the identity and access management integrating with Kafka. And in particular, is your, I mean, I've been looking at, I know that Kafka itself has support for controlling who can submit or receive from a given topic using ACLs. And I've looked at Confluence offering, and there's support for using SAML and for you know, adding authorization to you know, SCiMMA management, and so I'm just wondering, is the model that, you know, a given I mean, let's say that I'm you know, building a let's say that I'm preparing to launch a new space mission, and I want to provide Kafka alerts. Do I stand up a broker that and then tell you know, would-be recipients to connect to that broker, or do I set up or do I create a topic on an existing broker that is managed by SCiMMA or by some other entity? And if the latter, does the CILogon identity management stuff have a role to play in you know, making sure that it's me that's submitting alerts on, you know, topics that have to do with my mission and not someone else?
So I'm going to start answering this question, but I think we should let some of the people who are working on Kafka talk about this too. So I think the first thing to say is that we have not settled on an architecture for how to integrate the SCiMMA IAM into the pub subsystem that you're going to hear about tomorrow at this point. There's been, you know, we've been working on other aspects of it. And pardon me. For me, what looks the most promising is that there is already a prototype system set up to handle unsecured JSON web tokens as authentication and to pass authentication and authorization information around, which is not that much different than something that Jim has extensive experience with, was one of the pioneers on, which is the CILogon implementation of web tokens. And so I think that's a promising direction to go, but really we need to sit down between the identity and access group and the Kafka group and start hammering that out. And it's just that the time has not quite come where we can have done that yet. But Adam or any of the dev team, do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I think maybe Ron might have something to say on this.
Sure. I don't know how, but I'm almost certain that CILogon will be involved. I'm not sure if that'll mean you will use your CILogon to get a token for your application, or how that'll work. That's all to be developed. None of that has been developed.
Okay, and I see Mario's hand is up as well, who's also in the discussion.
Yeah, so as Ron said, we're looking at how to do this integration, but it will definitely happen. Like as you yourself said, Confluent already has an LDAP authorizer, so we could do something like that. And I think the CILogon stuff can be exposed through LDAP as well. But it's on our roadmap for the next 6 months to figure out the technical details. The important bit is that if you can authenticate against these mechanisms, you'll be able to authenticate against hopscotch, say 6 to 12 months from now. Now, your other question was the one that I'd like to take a stab at as well. How is one going to use this if you're, say, standing up a mission or you want to do it for research? We have to clarify this, I think, ourselves for a future institute proposal. But two of the ways I'm imagining this might work is one, this could be offered as a managed service by the institute. So in essence, it's a managed PubSub service that if you need these kinds of capabilities, you can authenticate, you can create your own topics, you can send messages over your own topics, you can allow others to read them as necessary. One of the things that I'm thinking of is a use case. For example, imagine I have my research group and I'm interested in subscribing to messages coming from, let's say, LIGO, LSST, or Swift. Doing something with those messages and then republishing a filter stream or somehow different stream onto my own private topic that only my research group can see. Those are the kinds of things that you would be able to do on a hosted service. Now, that does not work well for every scenario. Sometimes you want to be in full control of the server as well. And for that, we'll support deployments. So right now we're deploying, we're providing containers with instructions on how to set them up on your own. And so if you want to still use the same technology, but run everything under your roof, I see that as a likely option as well. But again, we're still, I think, in a fairly early prototype phases and are trying to figure out these details in part through input and feedback from groups like these. Adam, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you had it all there. So, I mean, going to happen, but details TBD.
Well, if we have no more questions, should we, adjourn 15 minutes early and get 15 more minutes worth of thought done on topics like that?
Yeah, and people are more than welcome to follow up with us at offline. We'll be happy to answer questions.
And it's probably worth also at this moment just reminding everyone that while we've sort of been operating as a smaller team to kind of move things along and get started, we now have sufficiently advanced that we've got these two key technologies that are beginning to take shape. we're going to be having these monthly meetings. Adam, remind me, I think it's the first Tuesday of each month we settled on.
Yeah, first Tuesday.
And so we probably will focus them around sort of questions and conversations and development. And we really want to start build up interactions around these things and welcome contributors. And you know, we're trying to now figure out how to sort of change what, as I say, has been a kind of a system of people that has grown up as within the funded project, but the idea, it's broadened, it's contracted in some directions. And so we're trying to figure out how to kind of bootstrap it one more level where we really go out to the community a bit more. So please keep, you know, try out things, come to meetings. I suspect, although we haven't discussed it yet, that some of the even technical work in the sprints and scrums we'd certainly, I think, welcome contributors. It can get a little out of control if we go too far, but on the other hand, I think we do want to encourage people. We don't know yet how we're going to deal with the actual consulting part of helping people to add features to applications they might have. So for example, we could imagine that someone who has a web service for a project right now wants to integrate authentication, is currently doing it with some local database that users sign up to, but really would like to go federated. We would like to be able to provide a service that, of course, that is more what a full-scale institute would do. But in the short term, we'd still be interested in finding some key applications where it might make sense to take that on and move forward with it. So again, I encourage everyone that's sort of thinking about things and has questions but ideas where they should go, keep an eye for the monthly meetings for sure, and we'll continue to try and broaden out to get ways for everyone to engage in different ways to make this very productive.
Cool. So thanks, Patrick, and especially thanks to Warren and Jim for a really good technical exposition, and to show the sort of things that we can do going forward. And as Patrick said, the exact things that we deliver and the priority with which we deliver them, there's some flexibility, and we'd really like to hear from the community about what their needs are, so we can work out what's most important. So tomorrow we have one more technical session where we will run through Hopscotch and show you how you can build your own client on top of the client that we've designed, and hope to see many of you then tomorrow. Otherwise, thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.